I am 72 years old, and I spent the last 40 years sleeping next to an emotional corpse. No, she did not pass away. We both died in 1994 and just forgot to bury ourselves. Listen to what a man who wasted a lifetime has to tell you, because your clock does not stop just because you are afraid to move. I am Arthur. For decades, I was a loan officer calculating risks for everyone else, while I let my own life go bankrupt. I currently live alone in a small one-bedroom condo, surrounded by cardboard boxes I have not had the heart to unpack. They are the ghosts of a 4-bedroom suburban home that was more of a tomb than a sanctuary. The gold wedding band on my finger felt like a lead shackle for nearly half a century. Every good morning was a mechanical chore, a script we read to each other while we rotted from the inside out. It all changed at our 40th anniversary dinner. We were at an upscale steakhouse, sitting across from each other on a plush leather booth that felt like a coffin. Eleanor was rambling about granite countertops and kitchen renovations. I looked at her hands as she cut her steak, and I felt a sudden wave of revulsion, not for her, but for the performance. I realized I had not truly heard her voice in decades, only the noise of her presence. That night, my heart rhythm shattered. In the hospital, as Eleanor sat by my bed, scrolling through her phone, I realized that if I died right there, I would be dying next to a stranger. I asked for a divorce the morning I was discharged, because the fear of dying was nothing compared to the fear of living another day in that silence. I am sitting here in this quiet room now, and sometimes the silence is so heavy, I need to know there is someone on the other side. Tell me, where are you watching this from? Just leave a comment with your city, and if it is not too much to ask, hit the like button. Not for an algorithm, but so I know my voice is reaching someone who still has time to change. I spent my life waiting for the right moment to be happy, not realizing that time is a debt that eventually gets called in with interest. We told ourselves we stayed for the kids. That was the biggest lie of all. We thought we were protecting them, but children breathe the air of the house, and the air in our home was toxic. By staying, I did not save my family. I just gave my son Daniel a map to his own misery, and now I have to watch him walk the same dark path I paved for him. I spent 30 years staring at spreadsheets and calculating interest rates on other people's dreams, while mine turned to gray ash in the fireplace. I was the man who always chose the safe route. I wore a tie that felt like a noose and carried a briefcase full of papers that meant absolutely nothing. I remember the sound of the garage door closing every evening at 6:15 precisely. That heavy mechanical thud was the sound of my cage door locking for the night. I would walk into a kitchen that smelled of lemon polish and roasted chicken, and I would kiss the cheek of a woman I had stopped knowing before my hair turned gray. We were experts at the dance of the kitchen island. We moved around each other like ghosts in a haunted hallway, never touching, never looking too closely at the hollowed-out look in each other's eyes. I valued the silence. I called it peace, but it was actually the sound of a heart that had stopped beating. I thought I was a good man because I never left, because I paid the bills on time, and because I kept the lawn trimmed to a perfect 2 inches. I wore my endurance like a badge of honor. You are probably doing the same thing right now. You tell yourself that the coldness in your bed is just the price of a stable home. You think that being a provider is the same as being a partner. I spent decades convincing myself that a house with a 4-car garage and a finished basement was worth the soul I was selling to keep it. We were 2 business partners in a bankrupt company called Family, and we were both too proud to admit we were broke. We had separate routines and separate hobbies, and eventually separate bedrooms, but we shared the same suffocating mask. I lived in a world of granite countertops and manicured hedges, while the foundation of my life was rotting with a damp black mold that no one wanted to mention. I was waiting for something to happen to save me, but I did not realize that the only thing waiting for me at the end of that long, quiet road was a dinner that would finally strip away the last of my excuses. It happened on a Tuesday evening at the steakhouse on 42nd Street. We were sitting in a plush leather booth that felt more like a padded cell. The air was heavy with the smell of seared fat and expensive red wine. Eleanor was talking about the kitchen renovation again. She was going on about granite patterns and the cost of Italian tiles. I watched her lips move, but the sound was just a dull hum. like a refrigerator in an empty house. I looked down at her hands as she gripped her silver fork. I saw the dry skin and the way her wedding ring was cutting into her finger. A sudden wave of revulsion hit me so hard, I nearly choked. It was not anger, it was the crushing weight of the performance. We were two hollowed-out trees, still standing only because there was no wind to knock us over. My heart started to stutter, right there between the appetizer and the main course. It felt like a bird trapped in a cage, beating its wings against my ribs in a desperate panic. The ambulance ride was a blur of red lights reflecting off the rainy pavement. In the hospital room, the air smelled of industrial bleach and stagnant fear. I woke up at 3 in the morning and saw her sitting in the corner in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs. The blue light from her phone screen was the only thing illuminating her face. She looked like a statue carved from ice. She was not praying. She was not crying. She was just scrolling through social media, while the man she had lived with for 4 decades was fighting for his next breath 2 feet away. I stared at her, and I saw my own funeral. I saw her standing over my casket, looking at that same screen. That was the moment the wound ripped open and stayed open. I realized that I was not afraid of dying. I was terrified of living another hour in that suffocating silence. When the doctor walked in with the discharge papers the next morning, I did not ask about my heart. I looked at the woman I had shared a life with and told her I wanted a divorce. I told her I would rather die alone in a gutter than spend another night pretending we were anything more than roommates in a graveyard. She did not even look up from her phone at first. She just sighed and asked who was going to pay for the granite. That was when I knew I was finally free and finally broken. I walked into this small 1-bedroom condo with my pride intact and a checkbook full of money I thought would buy me a clean slate. I tried to use the same logic I used at the bank for 40 years. I told myself that this was just a liquidation of assets and that I could start over by simply upgrading my surroundings. I went out and bought the most expensive leather armchair I could find and a sound system that could drown out the sound of my own thoughts. I thought if I filled this space with high-end electronics and modern furniture, the hollow feeling in my gut would disappear. I was wrong. The silence in this apartment does not care how much the carpet cost. It is a predatory silence, and it eats through every distraction I try to throw at it. I tried to reach out to my son Daniel with the only language I knew: money. I sent him checks for his mortgage, and I offered to pay for my grandson's private school tuition, thinking that a fat envelope could bridge the 40-year gap of coldness I left in my wake. He sent the checks back. He told me that my money smelled like the house he grew up in, and he did not want that scent in his home. I sat here in the dark, feeling the weight of that rejection, and I did what I always did. I poured a glass of expensive scotch and told myself that I was better off alone. I tried to convince myself that being a hermit was a choice of strength, and that I did not need the warmth of a family that never really knew me anyway. I was using old tools to fix a shattered life. I thought that isolation was peace, and that financial security was a shield against regret. I spent weeks sitting in that expensive chair, staring at the boxes I refused to unpack, believing that if I did not look at the past, it could not hurt me. But the past is not a file you can just close and archive. It is a living thing, and it was waiting for me in the shadows of this expensive little cage. I thought I was free because I had the divorce papers in my hand, but I was still wearing the same mental shackles I wore for 4 decades. I was still the man who assessed risk instead of feeling pain, and I was about to find out that the highest price of my life was yet to be paid. I am sitting here in this quiet room now, and sometimes the silence is so heavy I need to know there is someone on the other side. I need to know that these walls are not the end of the world. Tell me, where are you watching this from? Just leave a comment with your city. I want to feel the map of the world through your words. And if it is not too much to ask, hit the like button. Not for an algorithm or some digital vanity, but so I know my voice is reaching someone who still has time to know that their life is worth more than a comfortable cage. I spent my life waiting for the right moment to be happy, not realizing that time is a debt that eventually gets called in with interest, and I am here to tell you how to stop paying it. The wall I hit wasn't the heart attack. It was a phone call from my son Daniel 3 weeks after I moved into this tomb of a condo. I expected sympathy. I expected him to tell me he understood why I finally broke the glass and pulled the alarm. Instead, his voice was like a sheet of jagged ice. He told me I was a coward for leaving now, when it didn't matter anymore. He told me that he is doing exactly what I taught him to do. He is staying in a marriage where he and his wife haven't shared a real laugh in 15 years. That was the moment the floor fell out from under me. I sat on a stack of taped-up boxes and realized that my 40 years of endurance wasn't a sacrifice. It was a slow-acting poison I had been feeding my children every single morning at the breakfast table. I thought I was a martyr for staying. I thought I was a hero for keeping the roof over their heads, while the foundation was turning to black mold. But I wasn't a hero. I was a map maker drawing a path straight into a desert and handing it to my son. I looked at my reflection in the darkened television screen, and I didn't see a wise old man. I saw a warden who had spent 4 decades polishing the bars of his own cell, and then wondered why his children grew up to love the taste of cold iron. The revelation hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I didn't stay for the kids. I stayed because I was terrified of who I would be without the mask of the provider. I stayed because the silence of the big house was easier to manage than the noise of my own failure. I realized then that I hadn't saved my family. I had merely curated a museum of misery and forced them to live in the exhibits. That is the raw truth I have to swallow every night with my tea. My endurance was just a polite word for my cowardice, and the cost of that comfort was the soul of the next generation. I spent my life guarding a lie, and I woke up 72 years old realizing that the person I was protecting the most was the one who was killing me from the inside out. I was the one who locked the door, and I was the one who kept the key hidden in my pocket while I complained about the cage. There is no nobility in a slow death. There is only the dust that settles on everything you were too afraid to touch. I used to think that staying for the children was the ultimate act of a father. I told myself that as long as the roof did not leak and the tuition was paid, I was doing my job. But children do not just live in a house. They breathe the air of the house. And the air in our home was a slow-acting gas. When you stay in a marriage that has no pulse, you are not saving your children. You are handing them a broken compass and telling them that this is how north looks. Look at my son Daniel. He is 42 years old, and he is currently repeating every single mistake I made because I taught him that love is just a polite way to describe a long-term hostage situation. You think you are being a hero by enduring the coldness, but you are actually a thief, stealing your children's ability to believe in anything real. You are teaching them that happiness is a luxury they cannot afford, and that a stable cage is better than the open sky. Then there is the cost. I spent 30 years worrying about the division of assets. I stayed because I did not want to split the retirement account or explain to the neighbors why the lawn was not being mowed anymore. I treated my life like a balance sheet, where my soul was the only item listed under miscellaneous expenses. Let me tell you something about comfort. It is a debt that eventually gets called in with massive interest, and that interest is paid in the only currency that matters, which is the time you have left before the lights go out. You are trading your heartbeat for a granite countertop and a reputation among people who will forget your name 3 weeks after your funeral. I sat in that big house for 4 decades, guarding a pile of wood and stone while my internal world was turning to rust. The neighbors thought we were the perfect couple, while we were actually 2 ghosts, haunted by the lives we were too afraid to live. And the biggest truth of all is the difference between being alone and being lonely. I live in this small apartment now, and yes, sometimes the silence is loud, but it is a clean silence. It is the silence of a room where I can finally breathe without asking for permission. Being alone in this condo is peace. Being with someone and feeling alone is a special kind of psychological torture that turns your blood to vinegar. Sitting across a dinner table from someone you have nothing left to say to is more exhausting than working a double shift in a coal mine. Do not confuse a crowded house with a full life. A house full of expensive furniture and 2 people who are essentially strangers is just a very well-decorated morgue. You are waiting for the right moment to leave, but the only thing that is actually moving is the clock on the wall, and it does not care about your excuses or your fear of starting over. There is no perfect time to be honest, but there is a very real time to be dead, and you are getting closer to it with every breath you take in that frozen house. My endurance was not a virtue, it was a slow suicide, and I am here to tell you that the knife is still in your hand. I do not have 40 years left to fix what I broke. My clock is ticking in this small condo, and the sound is like a heavy hammer hitting a nail into a coffin. You might still have a choice. You might still have enough sand left in your hourglass to build something that is not a lie. Do not wait for a heart arrhythmia to scream the truth at you while you are staring at a sterile hospital ceiling. If your marriage is a desert, walk out while you still have the legs to carry you. Do not stay until you are too frail to move and too bitter to remember the sound of your own laughter. Forgive yourself for the decades you wasted guarding a pile of cold ashes, and just leave. The world is much bigger than that suffocating house, and the air out here is thin, but it is real. I am 72 years old, and I am finally breathing, but I am breathing alone, in a room full of cardboard ghosts and boxes I will never unpack. What are you going to do today to make sure you do not end up like me, counting the days in a small apartment full of regret? What will you change before the silence becomes your only friend? Do not let your life be a story about how long you endured a slow death. Make it a story about the day you finally decided to live.